look, many developing countries, and the U.S. is considered a developing country, many of them have a single payer and it's working. The U.S. does not, and it is the one that spends the most but has the worst outcomes. So I don't know the mechanics of it, how it will work, in all honesty. But if it's being done in another place, it can be done here as well. And I tell you, I sit on the health committee, and over the past 9 years, I've seen more than 20 single-payer bills that have come. Karen Montgomery, that's her baby. They have come over and over again over the years. The reason why we have not passed it is because of the fiscal note. Because the fiscal note is, it's a lot of money, and we don't have the money in the budget. But the fact is that many countries have a single payer, and I've been a co-sponsor of such legislation. They have made it work. They have better outcomes than we have in the U.S. We're talking right now about having a global budget, incentivizing hospitals so that they do not have reoccurring admissions, closing down community hospitals, having ambulatory care centers so that we basically save money. I think that we have to have a balance with the quality of care that we give and the money that we spend. And again, if it works and has worked in other countries like ours, developed countries, we can do it here.
I'm not a supporter of the single-payer health system, and let me tell you why. Because the VA system is the largest single-payer health system in our country and in our system. And you can see that our veterans are not getting responsive medical treatment. What I want to do is for the Veterans Administration to be able to take those programs that they are good at, to create a center of excellence, whether it's in post-traumatic stress disorder, or whether it's traumatic brain injury, or even military sexual trauma or mental health. Let's focus on that. But what I want to do is to make sure that many of those benefits or many of those opportunities for our veterans and for our retired employees, that you can use those benefits in community hospitals. Two things that you're going to get in return. You're going to get responsive medical treatment that could prevent a further health issue or even potentially save your life. The second thing you're going to get is you're going to use those federal resources to help infuse our local economies so more jobs can be created and the greater tax base to our local communities can be established and can be shared. And so based on what we have here in the United States with the VA as a single-payer health system, we have to do a tremendous overhaul. We very well know of the VA to get the deliverables, to get the outcomes that we desire. And to start that system over for the entire country, it would be disastrous. So I do not support a single-payer health system or to infringe upon our seniors' opportunities for benefits.
Yeah, I think Mr. Christopher's kind of stated my position as well. I mean, if we were starting from scratch all over again, I'd take a close look at single payer. Joanne. I'd look to see that it works in some countries, but I also know that this country is not like every other country. We're probably one of the most diverse nations in the world, and a nation that does value the republic form of government, where there are some things that happen federally, there's some things that happen at the state level, there's some things that happen in partnership. So while on paper I think single payer looks good, I think that train has left the station. We've got 50 different markets in different states. We've got individual markets, small group market, large employer market. We've got some public sector programs like Medicare, Medicaid, VA, etc. So to go from where we are now, a single payer, given what we just went through in the last 6 years in passing the Affordable Care Act, that's not a path that I would want to go on. I think we're in a good place in terms of the trajectory, the movement. I think the focus ought to be on improving the Affordable Care Act, addressing issues like we're talking about on expanding Medigap coverage, improving the VA system. I think we've got a really solid foundation. I wouldn't replace that with a single payer.
Yeah, I think the challenge with it is, kind of where we are and trying to change it midstream. But I gotta say, I don't think there's any question if we were going to start over again, single payer would be the right way to go. And I think Joseline's right about how things have worked much better in some of the European countries that are pursuing that model than they are right now in the United States. So we sort of built, this is like the, camels is a horse built by committee. This is one of those kinds of examples. So what we're trying to do now is really kind of a patchwork effort to fix things as we move forward. And it's not going to be a smooth way to go. But I think to the extent we can move in that direction, and I understand there's going to be huge opposition from the insurance companies and the like, because many of them will feel that this is going to take money out of their pockets. Prescription drug, big pharma, and it is. I mean, that's the point of it. They're overcharging for a lot of things. Their policies costs that went up after Obamacare was put in. That frankly, I got to wonder about whether some of those increases were actually mandated by market forces, as opposed to this is a great opportunity for us to raise some of the charges we can impose and blame it on Obamacare's phase-in. So I think it would be hard to do it from where we are, but I think it's the right goal. It's the direction we should be moving in, and we should try and do as much of it as we can.
Again, I agree with everybody else, and I'll say this about single payer. When we talk about the military, I think it would work, the VA, I think it would work a whole lot better if you had people that were administering it the correct way. You got a lot of folks in the VA that just weren't administering it the correct way. That's the reason why it's had so many problems. But clearly, when you start talking about government across the board, for us to just break into a single payer act, no, there's too many avenues, too many things that are going on, and I couldn't even begin to sit here and tell you all of the impact it would have if we were just today scratch everything and develop a single payer for all workers. So again, I don't agree with that, but I would like to look at the VA more and understand why theirs isn't working, because I've talked to too many people and said it's how they're administering it, and that's one of the biggest problems they're having with it. But when you start talking about trying to change it, and certainly it has worked in countries, as Johnson has said, but when we're talking about here, trying to put something like that in place, I mean, it just would cause too many problems, and I would have to really, listen to the real experts. We'd have to sit down and really put our heads together on Capitol Hill to figure that one out. But right now, it just doesn't seem to me that it would be feasible for us to change our entire system for that. Thank you.
So I'm going to start out by saying that there is no quicker way to make veterans angry with you than to suggest privatizing their healthcare system. Now that said, this is not a country that has historically shied away from doing hard things. We went from the Wright brothers' first flight to putting a man on the moon in 66 years. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to get single payer healthcare tomorrow or next year, but if we look at long-term goals, or even medium-term goals, so let's do it 10, 20 years, I think that there is nothing that we can't do. I mean, we can look at all of the systems that are in place all around the world, because there are a number of different implementations that different countries use. And what we need to do is we need to look at how each of them works and see which one is the most practical for us to transition to over a period of years. And that's kind of what I said in my opening statement, is that we need to take a longer term look at things. We can't just say, what can I do before my next election? What can I start building putting building blocks in place for, so it can be done maybe by me and later terms, maybe by whoever comes after me. And I think that's what we need to do, is we need to do the hard things. Thank you.
Mr. Warren Christopher, you're the lucky person, mate. Back to the Congress, I think that there's a lot of studying that's going to be required before you ever begin to find yourself having to vote on these various issues. But you've tried to look at a lot of questions and get those that we thought would really give people an idea where you stand today. If elected to Congress, how would you vote regarding extending Medicare sequester cuts or approving cuts in Medicare to pay for other programs? Please explain your answer.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you're absolutely right. I say this often. As a federal legislator, we're responsible for three things. The number one thing in my mind is providing first-class gold standard constituent services. The next thing that we're responsible for is bringing home our fair share of federal resources, whether that is through grants, whether that's through appropriations, or whether that's through procurement and acquisitions, prime government contracts. And the next thing that we are equally responsible for is legislation. And Mayor, as a new legislator, you're absolutely right. There will be opportunities for me to introduce legislation, whether it's a Senior Protection Act to guard against predatory lending or gimmicks and scams for our seniors, to introduce legislation to make sure that our returning citizens truly get a second chance by expunging the records of nonviolent criminals, or whether it is through ensuring that our small businesses, we need to redefine what a small business is. But on this issue in particular, when it comes to making sure that we are protecting our retired and our current federal employees, I would vote every single time. Remember, I provided for my 2 daughters on a federal salary. And I want to make sure that we're protected and doing everything that we have to do to protect current and retired federal employees from any erosion of further benefits. And our veterans, we see the same thing, whether it's trying to retract on the promises that we made when it comes to commissary benefits or TRICARE or health care. We've got to stop those kind of things. When you make a commitment, you make a promise, you make a promise and a commitment.
I think sequestration was an abdication of responsibility. I mean, for Congress to basically throw in the towel and say we can't agree on balancing a budget, we can't agree on an appropriate federal debt limit, so let's pass sequestration. I mean, Americans have suffered both in defense capability, the erosion. You hear Republicans talk more about that, but they're not too wrong in terms of the erosion of our defense capabilities, but also in non-defense discretionary spending. Programs have been cut. It's impacted the workforce. I think it was the responsibility. I'm not going to support any extension of sequestration, and I'll support every vote to eliminate sequestration. I'm glad to see that for the next 2 years we're lifting the sequestration cuts. That's our responsibility. To go to Washington, to find the common ground that reflects the values of the community, to pass a budget, where possible, to pass multiple-year budgets. Like I support multiple-year budgets for the VA. I support multiple-year budgets for transportation, infrastructure investments, and the like. But not to abdicate our responsibility and say, well, we can't reach agreement, so let's have these draconian cuts, knowing that nobody can live with it, so we'll come back like smart people later, yet we never did. So I thought it was irresponsible, and I would never support a maneuver like sequestration.
Yeah, under the Constitution, the way it's supposed to work is that spending bills are initiated in the House and they go to the Senate and they get passed, and the president decides what gets signed into law. For several years, the House was unable to pass any spending bills whatsoever. So it's a complete abdication of their responsibility. The House, the Senate didn't initiate anything either, so they do what's called a CR, continuing resolution. So it's like this sort of at the last minute, they put a lump everything together, all 13 bills, all the spending, and they just kind of pass it all at once. Frequently, it's really hustled up because they do it in the lame duck. So after the elections have happened already, so it's like around the holidays, they'll just push this thing through. They call it kicking the can down the road. To try and get around that, try and force something to happen, they came up with the sequestration idea, and the thought there was, wow, this will have to force members of Congress to vote on something and get it done, because who would want that? But guess what? They still weren't able to do anything and pass legislation. So we got sequestration, you got across-the-board cuts, you got cuts in defenses, which is mentioned, but everything got the meat cleaver. They were just cutting, chunks of the budget off every department. Every spending bill was losing the money in that way. And this is one of the particular instances of that. So obviously I think that is something we should oppose. We have to go there and force the House to do what it's supposed to do, force the Senate what it's supposed to do. The job that you get paid to do is something that needs to move forward.
I agree, 100%. Sequestration is ludicrous. But when you're talking about the fact that, and all the cuts of the way it's done in the way, like we were talking about, actually what Glenn was just talking about, the cuts across the board, slicing, just dicing and slicing, because it shows you to me how hostile the environment is that we're going into. That's really what I really want you to understand. We got to understand that we're going into a very hostile environment. We're talking about Congress. We're talking about, you got people on one side saying, I don't care what you come up with. If you're a Democrat coming up with it, we don't want to hear it. and then you got the Republicans the same way. So when you go in that environment, then all of a sudden you talking about, no, I wouldn't be for sequestration at all. I think it's like I said, I think we need to figure out a way that we can come to a common ground, even though, to be honest with you, when I look at where Congress is today, and even what we're talking about kicking the can down the road and all of the ways that we're busy right now in Congress trying to mutate around every law that's made. Somebody comes along and tries to mutate around it and do something else. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why it's so important when you send somebody to Congress now, you got to have somebody with fortitude. Somebody's going to go up there with a concern for you and not willing to back up. And so I certainly look at, when I look at sequestration, I look at the continuing resolution, all the things that's been done up there to get around the budget and spending and cuts. You're going to have somebody, we got to really know, we got to do our homework, as you mentioned earlier, on these bills and so forth. But again, it's going to be some serious, I can just see the contention going up the Capitol Hill, the way things are now, especially as Democrats versus Republicans. Thank you.
I find it somewhat absurd that we have accepted as the new normal something that was never supposed to even take place. As has been mentioned earlier, sequestration was never supposed to become law. It was a threat to both Democrats and Republicans that they needed to work together and put together some kind of budget, or there were going to be these cuts across the board that both sides hated. And it didn't happen. And it hasn't happened since. I mean, there have been, there's been no real discussion about moving to, back to regular order. It's just, I guess we're going to keep talking about sequestration. And that, something that was never supposed to be in law in the first place shouldn't be accepted as our new negotiating baseline. I think we need to get rid of it, and we need to start having a discussion, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, about what the needs of the federal government are. And once you determine what those needs are, then you fund the government at those levels. It's not a complicated concept. And when it comes to the specific areas that were hit by sequestration, so much damage was done by sequestration, and so much damage can be undone by getting rid of it and moving forward with regular order. And that's one thing that I think that if we sit down and we talk about the problems and how to solve them, we can get past.
For the last 9 years, as a member of the Health and Government Operations Committee, we hear it all. It's a committee where being a Republican or a Democrat does not really come into action because health affects everyone. So oftentimes we hear from people that have some serious, serious problems. We hear about the opiates, problem that we have right now. We hear about behavioral health. We hear about cancer. You name it. We hear about childhood obesity. When we're making a decision, we try very hard to think about the fact that the money should follow the policy, not the policy should follow the money. There's a big difference. I want you to think about that. If you were to support me and vote for me, I will look out for your best interest. I will make sure that your benefits are not cut. I will make sure that you don't have to contribute more than you were required to. And I will vote against sequestration. In the last 9 years, as a member of the Health Committee, I do my homework. When there's a bill that comes, I read it. I read the fiscal impact. I talk to the stakeholders. I do research. I call experts. And then I decide how I'm going to vote. And that is exactly what I would do as a member of Congress representing you.
Thank you very much. One thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to combine two questions. So listen carefully.
This is 3 minutes.
What I'm going to try to do, the first part A, is short. Just think about it for a second, and then I'll go on to part B. The U.S. Postal Service serves 152 million businesses and individuals 6 days a week today. I want you to briefly explain your position about continuing the same level of service in the foreseeable future. We've all heard about cutting back on the 6-day-a-week delivery. So that's the first part of the question. The second part also involves the Postal Service. The Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act which was enacted in 2006, mandates that the Postal Service must pre-fund 75 years worth of future retirees' health benefits, unlike all other U.S. federal agencies or private businesses. As a result, the Postal Service is making $5.6 billion annual payments for 10 years to try to cover what's required by this act. These payments have resulted in 86% of postal losses since 2007. Now that amount will go up starting in 2017. But can you imagine $5.6 billion every year is paid out by the Postal Service because of this Accountability and Enhancement Act. It's the only agency required to pre-fund for 75 years worth of future retirees' health care costs. So my question to you is, number one, what is your position on changing the 6-day-a-week delivery? And what is your position on this pre-funding requirement on the Postal Service?
Let's start.
Good, okay. You know, let me answer it this way. The U.S. Postal Service, when it was first founded, had almost no competition. And we never would have been able to grow as a nation without the U.S. Postal Service. Going to all parts of the country, delivering correspondence, communications, business, and personal. Today it's a different environment because there's competition between so many private carriers of cargo and other materials. We should not be handicapping. We should not be tying the Postal Service's hands behind their back to make them less competitive. UPS, FedEx, they can deliver 7 days a week. So why do we tell the U.S. Postal Service that you can't deliver 6 days a week? We should not be limiting the U.S. Postal Service. So I would oppose rolling back to less than 6 days. And I also am very concerned about asking the Postal Service to put in this huge requirement, prepayment, when others are not required to do that. All you're doing is tying the hands of the Postal Service. What we do need to do with the Postal Service and every other government agency is have high standards of accountability, have goals and metrics that we can measure performance and progress, and have them meet those performance objectives. But we don't do it by tying the hands. I think that the rolling back to 5 days, and I'll finish this sentence, and having that high burden on prepaid does just that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Postal Service has really been struggling with the transition. It's not just FedEx and UPS. I'm a lawyer. I litigated. I file most of my court filings now. I don't do it through the mail. We just do it by email. We have electronic filing. You can just send it. You hit the send button, and it goes to the court. When I send my letters to other lawyers, I send it by email, not only because it doesn't cost anything, but also because I have a record of it. So, as technology changes this industry, I think we have to allow the Postal Service to do that as well. Cutting back on service, I think, from 6 to 5 would really handicap them even further, so I don't think that makes sense. And I agree about the pre-funding for 75 years. But the Postal Service really needs to rethink what it's doing, too. I mean, I think there are a lot of challenges that they're facing. To be blunt, I don't think that over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, some of the adjustments that have been made have been the best. And clearly there's more work that needs to be done for them to keep up. But, we got to make sure that if we're going to continue to have it, we have to allow them some flexibility. Now, I'll give you one that's controversial. Sometimes the Postal Service wants to close post offices in areas where, there's nobody but the horses and cows to go check on their mail periodically. Now, I know that in those areas, members of Congress who represent those areas fight very hard to keep those post offices open. But if we're really going to be serious about spending the money efficiently, those might be some of the changes we're going to have to allow.
Right, man. One of the things when you look at the Postal Service and then you look at technology, and Glenn hit right on it, and I've done a lot of cases to work with people, I'm not a lawyer, but just representing people in the government. When you're talking about now being able to hit buttons and send information and get the mail now, it's almost like it is becoming a dying breed to some degree. And how do we handle that? I mean, how are we becoming flexible? And there's a lot of various entities in the government right now that are becoming dying breeds. And we're trying to figure out how do we keep it going and how do we keep it with jobs, keep from losing jobs and so forth. When you start talking about cutting back from 5 to 6 days to 5 days, that's a lot of money that the government is looking at. How can we save? I haven't really looked at this problem as extensively. I would have to look at it, but I mean, I could see just from looking at technology that the need for the postal worker is changing. So we're talking about this amount of money when you're talking about the 65 billion with 5.6 billion. These are numbers to me that are kind of wow. This is deep, but I realize this is change that's taking place, and we as your legislators have to look at this stuff and try to come up with the best way that we can protect workers. We always want to protect the workers no matter what we do. That's what we got to understand, because people rely on that paycheck. So again, this is something that I definitely wouldn't, and I would have to look at it and determine whether or not I think that cutting back on the days is definitely out. Thank you.
There are relatively few services that the Constitution mandates the federal government will provide. The Postal Service is one of those things. And I think, the point was raised that, FedEx and UPS are competing with them now. But FedEx and UPS don't serve the whole country. They serve areas that are highly populated and profitable to service. The Postal Service services everybody. So even if you use UPS or FedEx, you might be using the Postal Service for their last mile delivery. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when the issue of cutting back services is raised, because they provide such a vital service to the communities. Now, I think the idea that they should be pre-funding health benefits for people who haven't even been born yet is a little bit ridiculous. I can't imagine any logic where that even pretends to make sense. One thing that has been raised as a suggestion to possibly improve the viability of the Postal Service is allowing them to take on local banking services. And I think that's something that we should definitely look at going forward, because there are a lot of communities that are underserved by the banking industry. And so if we do that, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Thank you.
So this is one issue that I did do a little reading before I came. So I was really surprised to learn that if you cut the 6-day delivery, you would eliminate 50,000 rural letter carrier jobs. 50,000. The 6-day delivery benefits seniors, benefits people that are retired not at home, and are at home. That Saturday is so important. I also learned that the Postal Service is making money, contrary to what you read and hear, but they're still making cuts. I feel like the Postal Service is like the stepchild being mistreated. Because not only, do we want to roll back the 6-day delivery, which I oppose, but also postal retirees are being forced to enroll in Medicare or lose their earned benefits as well. I'm against the pre-funding requirement for 75 years. I also think that we need to be creative. We can do postal banking. Why not allow the Postal Service to provide services like allowing someone to cash their check? And like that, people won't be taken advantage of. There is a need for us to be creative. And I am against the pre-funding, and I'm against the 6-day rolling it back. Thank you.
I've often seen, particularly as an executive in government, whenever we want to try to privatize something, we begin to bring in a whole lot of contractors. And contrary to what people believe, when we bring in contractors, we pay contractors, as an example, if we bring an HR specialist, we pay that contracting company around an average of about $190,000 for one HR specialist, which means that that's certainly not what the HR specialist is making. So my point is, we have to keep those jobs that are inherently governmental. And the U.S. Postal Service, in my mind, is a organization, is a federal agency, a quasi-federal agency that should be kept inherently governmental. I do not support repealing or rolling back the 6 days, and I think that it is afoot to privatize our U.S. Postal Service by levying this type of requirement, this pre-funding requirement. So I absolutely am not in support of that. I also just want to take a minute, 30 seconds here, to talk about the windfall elimination provision and the pension offset. You know, I was disturbed with my own self, angry with my own self earlier. I want to make sure that I could let you know that I completely am in opposition to that. When, just like in the VA, or just like, I'm a retired colonel, but I also get disability benefits, and those are concurrent benefits. I believe that our federal employees, retired federal employees, have to also get their Social Security, eliminate the 2/3 to make sure that they're getting their benefits that they work for, earn, and deserve.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to ask one more question before I allow you to do your closing statement. And we did start a little late, and so I hope the audience will be patient as we go one more question, and then we will give you 90 seconds for your closing statements. The last question will go to Glenn Ivy, and then when we do the closing statements, we will start with Mr. Fogg. Okay?
That's right.
Glenn Ivy, the question is, Congress has a very low rating by the public on its performance due to its inability to resolve gridlock. What experiences or skills do you possess that you believe will help you to improve working relationships between Democrats and Republicans in Congress?
Well, I actually had a chance to work on Capitol Hill. I worked on the House side, started with John Conyers in 1987, left the Hill but came back in 94, I think it was, worked on the Senate side for Senator Regal, the Banking Committee, then Senator Sarbanes, who took over after Senator Regal retired. Then I moved into the leadership staff for Senator Daschle, who was the Democratic leader in the Senate. So I've got a lot of experience working in Congress. And I've also seen how, there's a give and take. You can get things done, but not everything. And sometimes you're going to have to fight about things. And I saw that a lot, especially with Senator Daschle. But, there are opportunities to get things done. I'll give you an example. Congressman Conyers had a bill that he wanted to get through, and this is about fetal alcohol syndrome. And so the effort was to put warnings on alcohol bottles, whether it was beer, wine, or whatever, so that pregnant women would know that drinking alcohol while you were pregnant could actually injure the baby. And people didn't know that. This is like 30-something years ago. So he wanted to sponsor, a co-sponsor in the Senate, and he got this guy named Senator Strom Thurmond, who was the Dixiecrat segregationist from South Carolina, who Conyers has, I don't even know if they would agree what time it was, but we were able to come together, and everybody was shocked that the two of these guys could come together on a bill. This must be okay to pass. And it flew through the House and the Senate and got done. There are chances for us to do things like that right now. Cybersecurity legislation, I think, is one. Criminal justice reform is another. And we'll be able to work on those things.
Well, I can say this to you. I work with a coalition, I was the co-chair of a coalition that got a monumental bill through Congress. I saw, and matter of fact, it was Sensenbrenner, who's on the Republican side, that we worked with him and got this bill through, and we got it signed under the Republicans. Matter of fact, President Bush signed off on it. The first civil rights legislation of the 21st century, known as the No Fear Act, Notification Anti-Federal Discrimination and Retaliation Act. This was powerful. So that tells you that I've had experience on the Hill working how we can get legislation through. And believe it or not, we got opposition from the Democrats who didn't want it to go through under a Republican. So that was very powerful what we were able to do. And I can see it happening, but the key, what I find that is going to Capitol Hill, we have to recognize today more than ever, it's a very hostile environment. When we see even the rhetoric coming out of Washington, when we see the people that are running for Congress, when we see what our Congress told our president, I don't care what you bring up in here, it's not going to pass. So we know we're going into a very hostile environment, and all I'm saying to you again is that's what we have to understand is we can work with you.
But if you're going to give us something that's going to really hurt the people we represent, I'm not going for it. Thank you.
One thing that I believe would help me in kind of overcoming the gridlock is my focus on underlying problems and not just, doing the normal partisan grandstanding that you see, if you turn on C-SPAN, you don't hear a lot of discussion about the issues. You have a lot of people repeating kind of predictable talking points. So what I would do is I would focus on whatever the issue is, whatever the underlying problem is, and at least get agreement on, is this a problem? And once you get past that, you can start having a dialogue about what to do about that problem. Because, Democrats and Republicans, we're not going to agree on a lot. Like, we'll have different ideas about how we solve the problems that we face as a nation. But the first step is to agree that there is a problem. And I think another thing is being able to look at a problem from multiple angles. So a good example for me is renewable energy. Now, there are a lot of Republicans who do not believe in global warming. I don't get why, but that's not important. Because you do not have to understand or believe in global warming in order to pass some of the important legislation that would address it. You can look at it from a national security standpoint, where we don't want to be embroiled in the Middle East forever. So there are alternative ways to look at and address the problems that we have, that if you're willing to come at a problem from different angles, you can get Republicans on board.
Last Sunday, I got the endorsement of the Washington Post, and I feel extremely humble and honored. And the Washington Post said, no one will work harder than Jocelyn Peña-Melnick. And I stand with all due respect to my colleagues, which I respect and I've gotten to know. I work harder than anyone else. For the last 9 years, I've been able to pass over 50 bills in the legislature. And they're not small bills either. One of those bills is a bill that says that in the state of Maryland, and Maryland was the first in the country, we should have digitized medical records. And let me tell you, when I put in that bill, the insurance company all came and they were angry. Blue Cross, Allstate, all of them did not want it because the bill required them to pay and give an incentive to the doctors to implement it. But what I did was I came early. I don't wait to January. We're in session January to April. Most of my colleagues wait to January to put in a bill. You don't do that. You put it in the summertime. You start working it early. I bring everyone to the table, and we talked and we compromised. We passed the bill. I also put in a bill that says that you should count inmates at their home address, not at the prison, which will violate the one man, one vote rule, because in Maryland, most of the prisons are in one district, and it will benefit that district. And I passed that bill, even though the representatives of that district didn't want it. I work well with people, I build consensus, and I get along well, and I do my work, and I go the extra mile, always.
The thing that with these endorsements, everybody did not get an opportunity to interview. Everybody didn't get the opportunity to present their case. So it's based on establishment relationships. Please understand that. You all, when you talk about working hard, I've worked hard for our country. I worked as a soldier. I worked as a senior military officer, leading independents, Republicans, and Democrats alike. And I achieved or helped to achieve national security goals and interests for our country. As the Chief of Staff at the Department of the Interior, I led independents, Republicans, and Democrats alike. And we delivered strategic change and business services with over $57 billion of procurement and acquisitions very effectively to our government and federal agencies. In the United States Senate, I worked for Senator John Warner, Republican of Virginia. I worked for Senator Elizabeth Dole. I worked for Senator Hillary Clinton and Bill Nelson and Jack Reed. It was about serving and delivering. This is about delivering leadership. This is about delivering change you can see and feel. This is about making sure that we are strategic thinkers and able to negotiate. I've negotiated theater security cooperation agreements for our country in Southeast Asia and in Europe. So when it comes to our federal government and what we can do with Republicans or Democrats, this is about serving our entire community.
Our responsibility as a member of Congress, without compromising your principles and your values, is to reach consensus and find the common ground. Sometimes the common ground is this big, you can barely see it. We need to find it, and we need to drive it. Sometimes as big as this room and the job is easy, but that's not that often. And I know from experience. As Lieutenant Governor, I remember when Governor O'Malley came to me and said, Anthony, for 3 years now, we've been trying to strengthen Maryland's law to prevent false health claims from being filed. Well, who would be against that? Couldn't get it passed. He said, Anthony, would you lead the effort? So we brought together the hospitals and the doctors and big pharma and the insurance carriers, and everybody agreed that we got to reduce fraud in the system, but everyone was afraid of the details. So I led a methodical effort to find the common ground, see where we agree, where we disagree. We got something passed. As a legislator, and also working with the legislature, in 2008, when I was working with the legislature, my cousin Kathy was killed by her estranged boyfriend, shot in front of 2 Montgomery County police officers who in turn killed him. I went to the advocates that were trying to, take on domestic violence. I said, what can we do? I said, well, we got to give judges the authority to order domestic abusers to surrender their firearms when they issue a temporary order. I said, that's not the law. For 10 years, they couldn't pass it. The governor said, Anthony, I need you to take the lead. And you can imagine, when you're taking guns away from people, you get people with strong feelings. But we found the common ground. We reached consensus. After 10, 50 years of failed effort, we got it passed. Common ground.
We're going to start with Matthew Fogg, and we're going to give you 1 minute for a closing statement. 1 minute for a closing statement.
Okay.
Can we do it?
Have a snack. Okay. Ready? Go. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking for your vote for one reason, because you need to look up here and see all these great folks up here and understand what makes Matthew Fogg different from everybody up here that's asking for your vote. Matthew Fogg challenged the federal government. I worked in that system where we talk about trying to work together, have common grounds, all the things that we do. I worked in that system, and I saw the fallacies right in that very system that I worked on. And I had to take a stand when everybody told me, don't do it. Whatever you do, you go along to get along. Because we want you to be the next congressman. Matter of fact, to be the next president of the United States. But the bottom line is, by me standing up, everybody backed away from me. All my friends, everybody abandoned me. My fiance left me. Everybody left me but my cat, and she thought about it. And I'm going to tell you something. When you have to really stand up to the government, sometimes you need people that's going to walk on Capitol Hill and do just that. It's going to be very unpopular, but you need folks who's not worried about that check that's going to be coming in, that big check they're going to give us, that insurance we're going to have, and all the things that we're going to have that's going to make us happy. We're going up there to represent you. If I get 2 years out of Congress and y'all want to fire me, but you're going to know I was there for you. So what I'm saying to you is this is important, because when you select one of these great people sitting here, just know I went up against that government on the inside while I was working for it, and we won that case in federal court, and now I can stand on that to say to you, my principles made me stand up to it. Thank you.
Albert Einstein famously said that you can't solve a problem with the same type of thinking. And I'm a big fan of thinking about problems at their root and outside the box. So that's what I bring as a candidate for Congress, is I think about the problems in a different way, at a very high level and at a very long term. You don't hear a lot of politicians at all talking about planning 10, 20, 50 years out. But that's just how I naturally think. You don't hear a lot of people talk about addressing root causes of problems, but that's how I naturally think. So what I want to do for you is be somebody who goes into Congress and changes how we talk about our problems. Not just getting up and repeating the same talking points that you've heard from everybody else, but actually talking about how we fix a broken system. Whether it's our broken economic system that has some people living in opulence while other people live in abject poverty, or live on the streets while we have 16 million houses sitting vacant, or if it's planning for an environment that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren can actually live in. investing in our infrastructure, and all of these other things that we need to do as a people. I believe in dreaming big, and I believe in having big ambitions. Thank you.
For the last 9 years, I've been in the Maryland legislature, and I have been effective. I have worked hard, and I have delivered. I voted against, I actually voted against corporations, against the gun industry. I voted for a very tough law, the ban of assault weapons in Maryland. I stand here having voted to increase the minimum wage. I voted for equal pay. I have a record. I got the endorsement of the American Federation of Government Employees, yes, because they have a relationship with me. Yes, because for 9 years they come to my office and they say, Jocelyn, this bill is going to affect our benefits. Jocelyn, this bill is going to affect collective bargaining. Jocelyn takes that bill, Jocelyn works it, Jocelyn finds support, and Jocelyn helps them because they trust me. I come from a middle-class family. I come from a family where my mom didn't have an education, where she was on welfare, where I am the first to graduate college and go to law school. I understand this district. I've been representing Prince George's and Anne Arundel for 9 years. I know the issues that affect these families. When someone calls my office and they need help, I've been there. I've gone the extra mile. And that is what you will get if you were to support me. And I ask respectfully for your vote on April 26th. Thank you.
You all again, I'm Warren Christopher, and I'm seeking to be your servant leader in Congress. And I'm asking for your support, and I'm asking for your vote. And this is why. For 30 years, I've committed my lifetime to service. That service in the military, protecting and defending the very freedoms that we enjoy here at home today. As a federal employee and an executive at the Department of the Interior and at the Department of Homeland Security, I've stood up and I've fought for the things that are important to our federal employees. I've worked in the United States Senate on very important committees and programs concerning our veterans, small businesses, and our national security, which are the requirements of a representative in Congress. When it comes to the thing that is most important to me, as a single dad, raising my 2 daughters as a single dad, I've produced 2 very beautiful and talented young women that are contributing to our society today. As I said to you earlier, a representative in Congress is responsible for bringing home our fair share of federal resources, legislation, and constituent services. I want to be that champion for you in providing gold standard constituent services, helping you to navigate through the bureaucracy of our federal government, to make sure you get good government and you get the benefits, that you get the opportunities that you have worked for, fought for, and deserved. That is the servant leader that I have been. That is the servant leader that I will continue to be. I don't like to fight, but I will just tell you, I'm a trained fighter. And if you bring the fight to me, you're going to get a fight back.
I was raised in a home where my parents taught, they demonstrated, they often preached the lessons of service. And because of the household that I was raised in, I decided after college to receive a commission in the United States Army, and I spent 30 years on both active and reserve duty, spending a year in Iraq. I've had the good fortune and privilege to serve 8 years in the Maryland General Assembly, and then later 8 years as your lieutenant governor. I'm excited about partnering with you as a member of Congress, and I say that because I believe one of the most important roles and responsibilities of a member of Congress is to serve constituents. And that's service coming out of the VA, it's service coming out of the Small Business Administration. It's serving veterans and serving our military families. And while our federal government is exceptional, it can be better when you have an advocate in Congress who's willing to invest in the federal workforce. I'm excited about partnering with you. I'm excited about continuing the service on behalf of the American people in partnership with you, and I ask for your vote on April 26th. And if you can't wait that long, go to early voting on April 14th. I'll take it then as well. Thank you.
I ask for your support now because I've delivered in the past. When I was state's attorney, when I ran in 2002, I told you we were going to work hard to reduce crime in Prince George's County, and we did. We worked with the police department and stakeholders in the community, especially the faith community, and crime came down, violent crime came down to 30-year lows. We had over 45% cuts in homicide as well. And major reductions in other types of crime as well. And we moved the office, which I also promised. We knew we couldn't jail our way out of the problem. So let's try a different approach, especially for first-time nonviolent offenders. And we did. We expanded some of the programs that were already there and created new ones. Teen court, a drug court. So instead of sending a drug user who was just arrested for the first time, instead of trying to send them to jail, why don't you get them treatment and counseling and get them back on the right track? So we set those programs up, and I think those worked as well. We also helped to establish a reentry effort here in Prince George's County, which didn't exist before I took office. And it still is around today. So the guys who are coming out of jail, 99.9% of the guys that go, they're going to come back out. Let's create a path to help them get there. But not just the state's attorney, when I worked on the Hill as well. So we're talking about increasing the minimum wage. I did that when we were working on Senator Daschle's staff in the late 1990s. Major legislation that shows cooperation between Democrats and Republicans. McCain-Feingold was one of the bills I handled for the Senate leadership in the mid-1990s. But let's also be clear, too. We're in a different place now than we were in the 1990s. We're going to have to fight to preserve Obamacare and other key issues until the Republicans come around. Thank you so much. I hope I'll have your support on April 26th.
At this time, I want to thank the candidates. Our President Dan McGrath is going to come forward and give you a formal closing statement. But I also want to thank you, the audience. And you can applaud now. President Dan McGrath.
Mr. McGrath, can we give the moderator a big round of applause as well?
That's the first thing I want you to do. I really want to thank these candidates because they definitely came prepared to address the issues of NARFE and our coalition partners. A lot of those inputs for the questions came from postal organizations, Social Security organizations, protect Social Security, and so forth. I think you met the needs. You did a great job around. I was back there monitoring the feed, and at the beginning it was choppy because I think the weather was acting up outside with the losing spring. But we only had one cutout after the opening statements, and you all performed well. You put on a good show for our audience. I think our members really appreciate it. And I wish you all good luck in this endeavor and your future endeavors, and also your current jobs. Because out of the election, of course, only one person makes it, and you're all winners. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, you showed that a debate, and this is not really a debate, it's a forum, can be civil. And I applaud you for that, especially in this climate that we've had at the national level. And it's kind of indicative of Maryland in a way, because Maryland does have sort of a reputation of working across the aisle in Annapolis. And I see that happening more in the last year than ever. So if you can carry that, one of you at least, to Washington, it'll be a great thing. Now, what I want to do is I want to thank the NARFE members who stuck it out and made it here to help us organize this. The team, led by Sudha Ellie, did a great job in setting this up. And with that, our feed should be cutting off. 3:30 was our feed cutoff time. So when you go home and watch this, remember, don't cut off after the first few minutes because it's going in and out. I think it will. On the other hand, we'll probably load the cam recorder one, which will be actually even a better picture. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and some of you folks are eligible based on your statements for membership or not. So here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't think I'm military service.